Hey, it's Shane with GotRom.com. So if you know anything about my story, you knew that I once upon a time had some pretty bad hip problems, FAI, hip impingement. Came out of those problems, started thinking, how far can I take my hip range of motion? Started to be able to do the splits, and now I help people do the same. So an interesting kind of new thing that's come up is that there's people who I help come out of FAI problems. They've gotten out of pain, restored basic mobility in their hips. Now they too also want to work on their splits. And the question comes, is there anyone who shouldn't get into the full splits? And I would say yes, there actually are maybe 4 types of people who shouldn't get into full splits. So let's break down what those 4 people are. One is people that are impatient or ego-driven. So if you have actually bony deformities or big cysts in your hip or labral tears, things like that, you do have something different going on in your hip that, say, the 13-year-old gymnast doesn't have. And so if you think that you can rush the process of getting your splits, or you have some egoic attachment to getting the splits, like I must get the full splits otherwise I won't be happy, you shouldn't even train for the splits because you're going to hurt yourself. So I would invite you to kind of set your ego aside and think of it more as like a journey worth going on. It's good, it's fun to train towards your splits, but if you have to get them and you get really frustrated and disappointed if you aren't progressing or something, then you need to back off and find a new goal because you're going to hurt yourself. There's also other people who shouldn't do the splits, and it has more to do with their actual kind of hip anatomy. There's some people who have something called hip dysplasia, where they have very shallow hip sockets and their hips can kind of dislocate very easily. Oftentimes these people can just easily go into splits positions, but they see pictures online of some high-level gymnast doing over splits or doing the middle splits and someone's pushing them down even farther, and they get it in their mind that getting just the regular splits isn't enough. They have to get the over splits or these more extreme splits positions, and they ignore signals from their body that are saying stop, back out. So if you're someone who either has hip dysplasia or you've got just like huge cam deformity in your hips or huge pincher deformity in your hips, and you're pushing through bad body sensations like sharp pinching and pain, and you're not adjusting and changing your postures and positions, then you probably also shouldn't work on your splits. So it can be the type of people who shouldn't work on their splits. It can be a mental, emotional thing, like they're just too ego-driven or they're too wrapped up in the goal, or it might be an actual structural issue like they've got hip dysplasia or their impingement morphology, their bone morphology is just too extreme and they're not listening to their body sensations and forcing themselves into positions that their body isn't ready for or may never be ready for. So if you can't be totally happy with whatever the reality is of where you're at today, then don't train for the splits. But on the other hand, if you are able to recognize and be happy with wherever you are today, then go ahead and train for the splits. So those are a couple categories of people who maybe shouldn't train for the splits. So if you're one of them, either tweak your mind or back off on your expectations of getting the super over splits like the 13-year-old gymnast that you saw. And I think those pieces of advice will serve you well. So take them to heart.
Yeah.